So let's talk about how do you get onto the Supreme Court, the politics of judicial selection. The president, of course, appoints members to all the federal courts, not just the Supreme Court, but they have to be approved in the Senate. In the lower courts, appointments are handled through what we call senatorial courtesy. Now, this is an unwritten tradition, but it goes all the way back to George Washington, where a judge is not confirmed if a senator of the president's party opposes the nomination. So here's what will happen. Let's say Barack Obama's president as I make this video. So let's say a district court judgeship opens up in California. He's going to turn to the two senators from California, Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, and he's going to ask them for recommendations on who to put into that slot. And they are going to recommend whoever they recommend, and he is probably going to choose somebody from that pool. If he were to choose somebody that either of those senators opposed because they are Democrats and he's a Democrat, he will not appoint that person. This is, as far as I know, never been broken. Now, if a judgeship opens up in Texas because the two senators from Texas are Republicans, John Cornyn and Kay Bailey Hutchison, as we speak, about to be Ted Cruz, then he doesn't have to listen to their recommendations at all because they're in the opposite party, so he doesn't care. So what ends up happening is, at the district court level, the senators from the president's own party get to choose who ends up being the district judge. If there's no senator from the president's own party, then he puts whoever he wants in there, although he usually takes advice from the state party. The president has more influence on the appellate level, actually, than he does the district level, because the appellate level doesn't work that way because the appellate jurisdiction covers multiple states. The president has the fewest constraints on who to nominate for the Supreme Court. The president relies on the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to screen candidates. As Attorney General, that's what they deal with, is the judicial system. So they'll typically bring a list of people that they think might do a good job to the president. And the president will send whoever he nominates to the Senate. 1 out of 5 nominees historically have failed to make it through the Senate. So it's really not unheard of. It's not even terribly uncommon for a nominee to fail going through the process. And that doesn't even count the nominees who are floated, meaning they say the president's about to nominate this person, and then the backlash is so great the president never formally nominates them. George Bush tried to nominate his secretary, Harriet Miers, but she was kind of laughed off the scene without any formal nomination. It doesn't even count candidates like that. The president, with minority party in the Senate, with minority support in the Senate, will have more difficulty. For example, if the president's party does not control the Senate, he's going to have a difficult time getting his nominees through, and he's probably going to have to pick fairly centrist nominees so that the opposition party will approve them. If the president controls the Senate, he can pretty much put through whoever he wants. If his party controls the Senate, I should say. You might assume that the Chief Justice is the most senior, respected person on the court, but that's not true at all. Because these appointments are for life, or until the person resigns or gets impeached, which hasn't happened, but it could. You might assume that the president might look at the court and say, you've got a lot of experience, I'm going to make you the Chief Justice when that job comes open. But they don't do that, and they don't do it because of politics. By putting the youngest person they can get in there, and usually that ends up being 50s, then they ensure that somebody who agrees with them controls that job for as long as possible. So when the Chief Justice job opens up, it is very rare to move a current sitting justice into that position. Now, it does happen. Reagan moved William Rehnquist into that job, and he had already been on the court. But when Rehnquist passed away, Bush put the relatively young John Roberts into that position, locking it up in all likelihood for the Republican Party for 30 or 40 years, and he's the current Chief Justice as I make this video. Here are some unsuccessful Supreme Court nominees. As you see, you can look through the list there and kind of get a feel. Who gets on the Supreme Court? Who are these people who are arguably the most powerful people in America? Well, you're going to be shocked to find out. It's generally white males, although that is changing, and it's changing fairly quickly, I should add. 108 of the 112 people who've served on the Supreme Court have been men. We've had 4 women, beginning in the Reagan administration with Sandra Day O'Connor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, appointed by Clinton, and then Barack Obama has appointed 2 women, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. 109 of the 112 Supreme Court justices have been white, The great Thurgood Marshall, who argued Brown versus Board of Education in front of the court, was put onto the court by LBJ. And, of course, Clarence Thomas put on the court by George H.W. Bush. Sonia Sotomayor being the other non-white member, the only female minority in the court's history. She's, of course, a Latina. It was this great show to pretend that they are non-political, but they really are, and they've almost all been active members of a party, giving political contributions, holding fundraisers. Many of them have held elected office. Taft, for example, will serve on the Supreme Court after being president. One of the most important Supreme Court justices of all time, Earl Warren, have been the governor of California before he gets to the court. Talk about Warren in a little bit. They're generally of the same party and ideology as the appointing president. The president wants to appoint people who agree with him. Now, sometimes they put somebody on the court, and he ends up going against the party. He ends up doing things the party doesn't want. Earl Warren, who I just mentioned, is a great example of this. He was put on the party by the Republican Eisenhower, but then he's going to become a major thorn in the Republican side throughout the late 50s and into the 60s. David Souter kind of famously was not conservative enough for the Republicans. Souter was put on by George H.W. Bush, and nowadays people refer to having a Supreme Court justice your party appointed go against your party. They refer to that as being Soutered. Judges and justices may not rule the way the president had hoped they would have. Once they're put on the court, the president has no more control over them. In fact, they're appointed for life, so they can do what they want. I should also add that religion is an interesting area here. Of the 112 Supreme Court justices in our history, 91 have been Protestant Christians. Before, the 1980s or so, there had been 6 Catholic and 3 Jewish justices in our entire history up to that point. Currently, right now, there are only Catholic and Jewish judges on the court. I'm sorry, there have been 7 Catholics and 5 Jewish justices. Right now there are 6 Catholics, 3 Jewish, and no Protestants on the court. And the reason is this is a way that parties can give something to an important constituency. The Democrats tend to appoint Jewish attorneys, although Sotomayor was a Democrat and Catholic. And the Republicans have consistently appointed Catholics. And this is a way they can satisfy constituencies without having to, say, run presidential candidates from that constituency. The Republicans currently like to put Catholics on the court because Catholics tend to be pro-life. And this is a way of saying we're packing the court with pro-life justices to make that part of our base happy. Although, interestingly enough, Sotomayor is apparently a pro-choice Catholic. But here you see the backgrounds of recent justices. You can pause this and take a look at it. But and this goes through by president, and doesn't just deal with the Supreme Court, but deals with both the appeals and the district court. And you can kind of get a sense of who gets into that spot. This is the Supreme Court justices as of 2009. Look it up on the internet because this has changed. Souter, for example, is gone. Let's see, Stevens is gone. Those 2 were replaced by Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor. But I guess the rest of it is correct.